Now I'm happy to introduce our next session, which is an amazing one as well. In my position, we actually see kind of a trend that customers approach us a lot to move their treasury operations, even to a larger extent than in the past, towards their S4HANA or SAP landscape in general. Well, that may be because we increased functionality with S4HANA, with the most recent releases again, and we added a lot of innovation. It may also be the integration benefits, but anyhow, that TMS market, I think, is approached by SAP continuously. And that's what the next session is all about. Actually, we are happy to have Newell brands here who will share their transformation journey with a move from a non-SAP treasury management system towards SAP S4HANA, how the challenges were, what the lessons learned were, and how the journey looked like in general. So I'm now happy to welcome on stage Gerard, S4HANA Treasury Lead at Newell Brands, and Andrew Carlson, Partner at Carlson Cash.
Thank you.
How you doing? I'm Gerard. I'm from Newell Brands. I've been in Newell Brands for about 6 or 7 plus years. Prior to that, I actually worked for Accenture and Associated British Foods. So I joined Newell Brands early 2018, where to lead the S4 project and the capital market side.
Hey everybody, Andrew Carlson, Carlson Cash. We are a US-based SAP Treasury consulting company, and we want to walk through here and show you what we've done so far with Newell Brands for their SAP Treasury implementation for S4HANA. So first of all, agenda, we just walked through the introductions. Gerard in just a little bit will go through a program overview of what we've done with Newell Brands. We are going to talk about the project highlights, go through what the scope of the project is, what the project timeline has been, really how they chose SAP Treasury and what their journey has been, because they were on Kyriba for a lot of the before this project, and then that's what we're transitioning to S4HANA. We'll go through a high-level view of what our system architecture looks like. It's a little bit interesting because we're doing a sidecar approach, so there still is an ECC system, and then we have a sidecar SAP Treasury system or S4HANA system for SAP Treasury. We'll go through our lessons learned, and common theme with today, going through in-house banking. I'm going to run through a demo of how some of the functionality works in in-house banking, and specifically the cash pooling, interest calculation, and everything, how that works beginning to end.
Perfect. So just maybe Newell Brands. Our CEO kind of refers to as the world's most unknown company. So at a glance there, you can see like quite a lot of the products that we actually have. Probably you use them in some way, shape of your life without realizing it. So just a quick snapshot, like, so obviously 8 billion in sales, 856 after EBITDA adjusted. They have 25 brands. Over the last year or so, we've actually rationalized all them. So we had 11 supply chains, which have all been merged into 3, which was quite interesting from a FX perspective. We're in 37% of our sales are international. We have 24,000 employees. So like one of our biggest brands would obviously be Yankee Candle. Hopefully everyone buys them. And these are the markets that we predominantly export in. So from a business perspective, we're predominantly B2B. We don't have a B2C, except for Yankee Candle in the US, where we would have quite a lot of footfall and stores. So obviously we have a quite diverse portfolio. So obviously this is a regional breakdown. So within Latin America, 10%, EMEA, APAC, Canada. Within the US, so 2 years ago, if you ordered from our company, so if you ordered Coleman and then you ordered Yankee Candle, that was 2 separate shippings. We did a project to harmonize all of that. So from a customer perspective, when you order one thing in the US, it's one shipping, it's one company, and we handle all the internal, intercompany, cash, etc., internal. We're also in the process of rolling that out globally, where local regulators will allow us to do it. So that project actually goes live in March 1 next year, and it will actually feed into some of the timelines that we're talking about right now. Yeah, so that's just as a snapshot to kind of show what brands. Obviously, before I joined Newell Brands, I wouldn't actually know a lot of the brands, but I've actually used all of them myself. So obviously, project overview. So just to give you a snapshot, in 2018-19, we would have a single entity multi-currency notional pool with BMG. Obviously, for regulatory reasons, we had to part from them. We set up a multi-entity multi-currency notional pool within London. That's actually a global pool. So we have all regulatory, where possible, we have everyone sweep their cash into London overnight, from a cash perspective. So part of that project, we also had, as Andrew said, a side cart where we started to standardize our SAP system. So we had another TMS. Not all of our entities were on ECC. So to put it in layman's terms, they were doing FIBAN outside of FIBAN. So it was a quite fragmented approach. So as we did the multi-currency, multi-entity notional pool implementation, which we finished last year, and we actually won the Adams Award for that last night, we started to implement all of our static data. So it was fragmented, it was broken, disjointed. So that took us quite a long time. During that process also, we did a lift and shift. So anytime we dismantled somebody from BMG, we added them onto FIBAN, implemented the 1 to 9 cluster, best-in-class standard processes. So from a high level, our month-end close went from 10 days to 2. So our corporate accountant was very happy. Then obviously we have the BAM, which we've set up. So we have the BAM, we have a 5-day forecast. About 78% of all of our entities are on SAP. We have Yankee Candle, which is around 52% of our global business. They're actually on Oracle, but we're actually getting rid of Oracle. Oracle goes live on SAP in February next year. So we have February for Yankee Candle, then we have our new one supplier model in March, and then you'll see the rest of the timeline later on. And we only do payments with international banks. So we did have 15 international banks. We only have 3 right now. We obviously, from an FX perspective, have a bigger, wide array. And then obviously, we're in the process of doing cash pooling and netting, TRM. So as people were talking about yesterday, letters of credit. So we have letters of credit for all of our products do end-to-end accountancy. So our S4 system feeds ECC on a month-end process. No accountants are actually involved in our month-end process from S4. It has been automated, it's been signed off, so we post journals automatically every day. So we have senior notes, convertible bonds, interest rates, currency swaps, revolvers, and capital leases. So we're quite active within the debt capital market world. And then from an FX perspective, NDFs, balance sheet, and cash flow. So from a cash flow perspective, we actually settle our cash flows through our netting process. So because we have a multi-currency, multi-entity notional pool, it gives us a better driving on the FX price. So as a company, we have decided when we go live with our FX process, we will leverage this. We're looking at other products like CLS down the line. So I was delighted to see other people talk about CLS yesterday, which was food for thought.
Okay. So this is a little bit of a recap, so I'm going to summarize this slide, but as Gerard was mentioning, implemented cash management already. We are bringing in all of the liquidity items, assigning everything when we're bringing it into SAP from an in-house banking perspective, and we will go quite in depth in this in a little bit, going through the cash pooling for in-house banking, calculating the interest at the end of the month, making sure everything calculates right, and then also to facilitate the netting process. From TRM, and FX. I think you covered
Yep.
this area pretty well, so I'm not really going to go too deep into it. Just in debt and investments, all the transactions brought into the system, everything's calculating correctly, everything is creating the automatic journal entries, and then from FX, we're doing cash flow and balance sheet hedging.
Mm-hmm.
So from a treasury journey, we have a handful of phases that we're going to go through. So first of all, this is complete. Cash management has already been delivered. Bank account management, setting up treasury payments in Newell system. In phase 2, the initial scope of TRM was intercompany loans, and Newell wanted to do a phased approach just to say, okay, let's have a proof of concept. Let's make sure everything works correctly for intercompany loans. All the accounting is coming in correctly before we build on that for the rest of debt and investments. And then also, initially, there were only a pilot program of treasury payments that were set up. So also mentioned payments expansion. It was brought out to additional banks, additional entities, stuff like that for the payments expansion. Next, this is where we are right now. Really everything is set up. It's just, we'll go through the timeline in just a second of why we are layering the actual go-lives in the way that we are. But the next one is really in-house banking, cash pooling, and then the additional scope for debt and investments. And then after that, it's a little bit later, but yeah, as I said, we'll see in the timeline side in just a little bit. Working on FX hedge management for the debt and or for the balance sheet and cash flow hedging, and then also netting through in-house banking, and Gerard will talk through the dependencies in that and why it's going live at this time, around the same time as the FX hedge management.
Mm-hmm. So if you look at the timeline, so like as I said earlier on, we've had a lot of change in the last 4 or 5 years. So from a structural perspective, anytime we kick off something, we set it from the top down and the bottom up, so we champion it from the bottom. There's been a lot of change, so we're setting up like centralized COEs for all processes. The reason why, obviously from a phase timeline, what we learned from prior phases was the adoption of the end user was a lot difficult, because my treasury team, they're not SAP natives. So the way we would articulate it to them, like they would say yes, 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 and then when we went live, they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. So from a phased approach, so like if you look at these products right now, we're actually in SIT and UAT already. So from an adoption phase, instead of having my Fin IT team go in and test it, make sure it works, I have my end users go in at least an hour a day, do their day job, which allows them to think about different scenarios on their test scripts, positive and negative testing. We also have a CRM system. We don't track our testing on Excel. Everything's in a system, so it's ticket-based, so you have to close the ticket or you're getting emailed every day about it. So our end users feel more empowered by this. From a testing perspective also, we're also connected to all of the banks. So when we actually initiate transactions, we get exception and rejection messages all the way back through the way. So obviously, in-house bank will go live in September. That's just to allow the users to, because if you think about the old world, ECC was Fin IT driven. Now S4 is end user driven. So the config and the setup, it's just a different way of looking at it, or different through a lens. So we wanted to do it from that perspective. November, we're going live for debt and investments, everything. That's before our year-end close. That's actually a quiet time for us, where all of our debts kind of layer off and mature, so it's less invasive. Then in-house bank technically goes live in December. In January, it will be leveraged for the first time without the Yankee Candle company coming on, because we obviously want to make sure that it works. Then Yankee Candle goes live in February. And then March 1, we technically go live our hedge management, and our one supplier model goes live on the 1st of March. So condensed timeline, but we're very comfortable because we've engaged in this. Myself and Andrew have been talking for years about this. So I would ring them up saying, I want a demo on this system, because people have started asking questions. So we would have given demos on FX March last year. So it's like just food for thought, and the adoption is very important to us.
Okay, So just since we mentioned that it is a treasury sidecar, I wanted to highlight how this differs from the current ECC system. And I mean, obviously, I don't have all of the functionality in the ECC main system for Newell. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that impact the treasury sidecar. So we have AP and AR in the ECC system, FBAN, electronic bank statements. So that's one thing I wanted to at least highlight, that is being managed in this system. It is not, we don't load the bank statements for journal entries in the treasury sidecar. And then all of the journal entries are in the main system. That's where the book of record is. So if we go over to the treasury sidecar, we are doing treasury payments, approving them in bank communication management, loading in the payment acknowledgement so we know the status of all the bank payments at any given point in time. For TRM, as Gerard was mentioning, debt and capital markets, we have our debt and investments managed here. Also foreign exchange for hedge management, balance sheet hedging, and cash flow hedging. In-house banking is also in this system. So cash pooling and our interest calculations are here. Netting, all the internal transfers are being recorded in the in-house banking area too. And then for cash management, we have prior day bank statements, current day bank statements that are being brought in for the balances and activity. All the GL transactions have the liquidity items assigned to them. Any of the TRM flows are automatically being brought into cash management from there, and then also have a AP/AR forecast. The one thing that you probably can guess from here, there is a lot of coordination that needs to happen between the ECC system and the S4HANA system to make sure that if we have a journal entry originating from the S4HANA system, we need to make sure that things aren't double counted. So that has been a big part of the project to make sure that that's all harmonized and is working together right. So to piggyback on what we were just talking about with in-house banking, and the presentation before us did a good job at doing it, talking through the in-house banking too. But what I wanted to highlight on here, we have a demo we're going to walk through what the functionality looks like. The big thing that I want to highlight with in-house banking, at least from my perspective, it is definitely simplified from in-house cash to in-house banking. The journal entry, just flow and process has been simplified. It's all Fiori based, so it is much easier to work with and look at and understand where the transactions are, and we'll be seeing that in a second. And then just in a second, I'll demonstrate what we are looking for cash pooling and how that looks. And before I go there, I just want to highlight the definition, at least how I'm walking through it. So within in-house bank, it is the functionality called central incoming payments. I know in the US, some people will call it more just cash pooling, but within the term here, it's central incoming payments. We are loading an external bank statement. And actually, I'll go to the next slide. So what we are doing is we have our external bank statement that we'll be loading in for any of our ZBAs that we want to track between our bank area header and then also each of the participants within our in-house bank. We are looking at the bank statement, finding the transactions, automatically creating payment orders for those transactions to show this is how the transfer is working. So for the example that I'm going to go through, I just thought I'd toss out some numbers here and say for our bank area header, cash is going out from the bank area header, going to our cash pool participant in our company code 3000. Also in our cash pool participant, it is sending money to the bank area header for 1100. And that's what we'll see in just a second. And before we go there, I just wanted to go through a little bit of the process too. I'm really going to be going through the top part of this process, but I at least wanted to have the monthly process down here to say, okay, for our daily process to track any of these ZBAs, any of the transfers here, we're loading our external bank statement. We can process and review the payment orders that are created from in-house bank. We can review the account balances for each of our participants in our in-house bank, and then run our end-of-day jobs. I do have that in pretty good detail in a little bit to go through what are all of the end-of-day jobs, but that is very also simplified in this process too, what it used to be. From a monthly process, we run the end-of-day job for account balancing, and that's what's really going to calculate our interest for our cash pool participants. We can review that interest calculation, and this all kind of happens as one part of the process for end-of-day jobs, but I want to separate it out. But then here we'll post the accounting for the interest at the end. So now we're in SAP, and we're just going to walk through what the process looks like. You'll see down here, I have a lot of different apps for the in-house bank process. To simplify it, I'm right here. I'm going to go through these apps here to go through what this process looks like. So first, we're going to go into managed service level agreements. What the service level agreement is used for is we are determining the scenario of when we're loading the bank statement. How do we determine the scenario for when we need to create the payment orders for any of these transfers? So what we are going to do is we're actually really just looking at our header bank account to say, this is our header bank account, any of the transfers leaving that account or coming to that account for the in-house bank, that's when we're creating a payment order. So I'm going to go through one of the examples in here. We can just go into the first one, the central incoming 1,000 from 2,000. So if I go in there, we're determining, okay, what account are we creating it for? So this account number, 92,000, that's actually my account number that I'm going to create it. That's our in-house bank account number in SAP right here. That number can be changed too, but that's what I have for my example. Down here, we're creating the conditions to say, when we're looking at that bank statement, what details am I looking for to be able to create these transactions? So the business transaction code on the bank statement, I used BAI, so it's 275, but it could work for CAMPT or MT940. We're also determining house bank and account ID to say what account we're loading it from. And that middle one, EBS memo, that determines what text we're looking for on that bank statement for when we're actually going to create that payment order. So if we see that scenario when we're loading the bank statement through the prior day bank statement process, then we'd create a payment order. I already loaded the bank statement. There's no real change there, so I'm skipping back past that. So now in here, in Manage Payments, I can look, well, after I loaded my bank statement, what does my payment order look like? So there's a little bit of testing in our system, so there's a lot there. But here we have our incoming payment order right now. It's just showing up as ready for processing. It hasn't automatically processed. There is a job that you can run to automatically process your transactions too each day. But for this example, I'm going to manually process it. I can also scroll down. What actually was created is I created one payment order, and it has two payment items in here. So for each of those transfers that we were talking about, for 11,000 or 1,100 and 1,400, those transfers are reflected in here. We can go in here, see any logs, see how it looks. And also, this screen is kind of cool because it shows the processing of where we are in the process for the payment order. So if I back out, I can say, okay, everything looks good here. I'm going to click Process. And now that has been processed and posted. So the initial posting for this has been completed. It also assigned a route and clearing agreement. That is just something that you have to set up to make sure that everything processes correctly. So now everything looks good here. I can go to the next one, which is Manage In-House Bank Account Balances. Manage In-House Bank Account Balances is where we can view all of the balances for each of our participants in our in-house bank. I have a couple different bank areas set up here, but I'm going to focus on our bank area pool, which is the one I'm using for cash pooling or central incoming payments. So I can go into this first one, which is our company code 2000. I can see that transaction has already been reflected here. If I scroll over, one thing I want to highlight, that statement number, FI journal entry, we will come back there and see that posted. Essentially, what that is as we run the GL transfer and as we post the internal bank statement to fully process this transaction, that will be recorded in this area too. So now if we go back, we're kind of going to breeze through the in-house bank application jobs, but I did want to at least show on this area that it's simplified. I know that with the old process, we had to schedule a bunch of jobs. This can all be done in this app. And so I'm going in here, go to my job template. We have a bunch of different job templates. They can be run individually, or I'm going to run one mass transaction where it's all of our end-of-day jobs. I'm just updating this so it shows that I'm running this in a single run. I'm just running this transaction once for all of these. And for each one, I'm just going to choose my bank area pool. So closing the account for the day, account closure, if there's FX that needs to be posted, posting that, the cash concentration. If this was set up for the cash concentration process, that would have to create something. Account balancing is at the end of the day. We're really at the end of the month when we're doing the account balancing. It will determine the interest. The last one is GL transfer. The bank statement prep is actually creating or generating the bank statement. Notifications, that's actually going to send the bank statement internally through our process. And so now all of these have been set up, and I have a little bit on the bottom of the screen cut out so we can't see that I click the process button. But now this is going to process. I can refresh the screen. These do have a red arrow on this finished. It's just something that's happening in my demo system, but everything is processing correctly. Everything is posting correctly through the process. You'll see I had to run it a couple times to get it to process perfectly for this demo, but now we can go to manage bank messages. This is, so if you think in the in-house bank or in-house cash process, we had iDocs. We were generating in SAP to create the data for our bank statements and everything. Here, we're using multi-bank connectivity or the multi-bank connectivity connector for the internal bank statement. So we have our outgoing messages, incoming messages. All that is each bank statement, internal bank statement that I'm generating, it is going through here. It's internally routing, and it shows up as an incoming message too, and I'm processing this bank statement to post as it is generated. So the last thing I wanted to show in here is managing house bank account balances. We can go back into our bank area, and we can see how the status has changed. So this company code 3000, I can scroll over, and I can see the FI journal entry. That's what was posted from the GL transfer. And then also when the bank statement was generated, now we have a statement number, so we can see there's about 20 days that passed between my first couple payment orders versus this other one. And then everything will populate in here when that is all done. Okay, and I just had this slide to kind of wrap it up. But yeah, so that's the end-to-end process, at least from a cash pooling perspective. It would look a little bit different when we're calculating the interest at the end of the month because we need to create additional payment orders for the interest process. But yeah, that is an interesting part of Newell just because it is a newer process and what we've been working on.
It works very well.
Yeah.
Obviously, so lessons learned. So we've been partnering with the Andrew and team for the last while. I always feel it's always about open dialect between everyone. So call a spade a spade. If you're struggling or you're late, don't delay. Like, you message up straight away so things can be adjusted. Like our timeline originally was to go live earlier, but then our CFO says, well, we're moving Yankee Candle, so we went, okay, we need to stop, let them do all the work, and we'll wait for them to come on. So once we communicated that was perfect. Obviously, solid processes, because obviously we are quite vast. We have offices in every country. It is quite different based on region, on ways of working. So I've spent 5 years standardizing the whole core ECC process, because obviously we are a sidecar to that. So once their system works perfectly and they do everyday reconciliation, etc., we don't have issues. But it also stands out like a sore thumb if they don't, because my cash can be off millions, and we can easily identify that. And then obviously the adoption. So we obviously use a champion model. So we have super users. We get executive buy-in. As Andrew would quite know, we make decisions quick and we make them fast. So if there is an issue, we sit down in a room, we talk about it, pros and cons, and then we walk out on the decisions made. So we don't procrastinate on delaying anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the only other thing that I'd say that's really interesting about Newell is you do involve your business users really early in the process. So usually when we're on a project, we involve them a little bit later, or some companies prefer to involve them only during UAT. At Newell, basically more towards the SIT phase, we design the solution and then we show them what the solution looks like and they start testing right away. Yep. So, yeah, that's everything that we had. Any questions? Perfect. No.
One question. We do have enough time for one question. Well, then maybe I have one. How did you avoid any scope creep? How did you make sure that you're just implementing the right features?
Every business user has their own needs, so we would evaluate it to say, is that a must-have or a nice-to-have? So there's certain elements that we were like, that's non-standards. Then we would refer back to Andrew to say, do I have this? Is this standard? No, you'll get that in a later phase, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just about understanding the business needs. When we blueprinted, that's it. Now, obviously, if the treasurer comes and says, well, I need this, then that's a different discussion. But yeah, we were quite controlled, like, so we would have a CAB process. So if it's not in CAB, it's not approved by CAB, it's not happening.
Thank you very much. Then, unless there are not last-minute questions, I thank you very much for that great session.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you.